Hey, it's Mark Lanier with your video thought for the day, closing out this week where we've looked at two of the minor prophets. We started the week in Amos and we've ended the week in Micah. Now, Micah, as I discussed yesterday, is a sentence in one name. The sentence is, "Who is like Yahweh, our God?" And it's a fascinating book to read because Micah shows God to be, in some ways, God the expected, what you'd expect from God. In some ways, God the unexpected, as God does some things that one would not ordinarily think. And that's the way it is with you and me. There are some things that God brings into our lives that we're not surprised. Now, I like to thank God before I eat food and acknowledge Him as the source of all the bounty and all the good things we've got, and certainly the food that we get to eat. But in candor, that's kind of expected. You know, I expect that in my day. But there are times where God brings the unexpected. And sometimes it's an unexpected blessing. It's just great news that you don't expect to get or to hear. It's a great experience that you didn't expect to have. It's mercy when you didn't expect mercy. But sometimes the unexpected is not something that you just would be wanting or looking for. And this was part of Micah's message. So Micah had a strong message against certain people who were walking in ungodliness. Micah was concerned about what looks like probably military people who were out in the country, if you will, outside of Jerusalem, in the countryside, and they were stationed there, and they would find houses and properties and things that they wanted, and they would just take it. It might have been legal for them to do that as military people, but it wasn't right for them to do it. And Micah calls it down and says, look, you're coveting fields, you're seizing them, you're seizing the houses, and what's going to happen is as you go in and take these things, God's going to come in and take you. They weren't expecting it, but God was paying attention, and God was going to come in, and with what measure they treated others, they were going to be treated themselves. It wasn't just them. It included, there were a bunch of fake prophets at the time. There were a bunch of people who said, I can speak the word of the Lord. I can tell you what God is thinking. I can tell you what God will do. And the catch was, you had to pay them to seek and give you God's insight. It's kind of like pay to pray instead of pay to play. Pay to pray. And these weren't real prophets, and they didn't have insight. I mean, God doesn't charge for his message to his people. God seeks to give his message to his people. God's not some counselor that you go to and say, hey, would you help me? And he says, okay, well, my hourly rate is. God's nature is to want to help. And so you've got these prophets who are saying, hey, if you pay me, I'll seek God on your behalf and I'll tell you what God has to say. And Micah comes down hard on them. Micah says, that these people are just really saying what the payors want to hear. They're not even saying the word of God. I mean, some of these guys were just saying, hey, I'm going to preach to you wine and strong drink. In other words, God's telling you, go out there and get soused, because that's what people wanted to hear. And Micah makes it real clear that these false prophets are themselves going to be shut into darkness. They claim to be people of vision. They will be people of darkness. That may not be what they were expecting God to do, but God can be God of the unexpected. Well, I look at these things and I look at these passages, and it leaves me with this as I roll into the weekend. God, in some ways, is what I expect. In some ways, he's not. But he's always bent on what's best. He's always looking what's in my best interest, what's in the best interest of all of his people, and what's in the best interest of his kingdom. And if we understand that, then we understand that when we walk in God's fellowship, we're actually doing something that is best for us and for him. Hey, this is free because we don't pay to pray. We like to share our video thoughts for the day to everybody. So have a great weekend. I'll see you Monday.